Senate Bill 31. The clerk will read the bill.
SB number 31 by Hughes, relating to exceptions to otherwise prohibited abortions based on a physician's reasonable medical judgment.
The chair recognizes Mr. Guerin to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, my layout's going to be a little bit longer than I normally do, so please let me get through it. And if you have questions, I'd like to wait and answer them after that. The Life of the Mother Act has brought together all major pro-life groups, the doctors and the hospitals, Republicans and Democrats, and people on both sides of the abortion issue have agreed to this bill. These groups include the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, the Texas Alliance for Life, Texans for Life Committee, Texas Right to Life, the Human Coalition, Texas Medical Association, Texas Hospital Association, Texas Civil Justice League, and Texas Campaign for Mothers. This bill passed out of the Senate 31-0. As you know, these groups don't always see eye to eye, but in this case, they work together to ensure pregnant women who have pregnancy complications get appropriate and timely care. And why is that? It's simple. We do not want women to die from medical emergencies during their pregnancy. We don't want women's lives to be destroyed because their bodies have been seriously impaired by medical emergencies during their pregnancies. We know women have died after care was delayed or denied. We know women have left Texas for life-saving care. We know women's bodies have been horribly injured because doctors and hospitals are afraid to provide abortions that could save their bodies. Doctors and hospitals need the clarity SB 31 will put into the law to be able to save women's lives and protect them from substantial impairments of their bodily functions. And on all those things we agree. Senator Hughes asked the medical board to adopt rules clarifying the law. The Texas Supreme Court also asked the medical board to write these rules. When the board finally acted, their rules were inefficient, and that leaves it up to us as the legislature. Senate Bill 31 has one goal: to change the behavior of medical professionals by providing laws that are clear, consistent, fair, and understandable. Doctors and hospitals agree SB 31 will achieve this goal. During this layout, I want to clearly state what this bill does and what it does not do. Let's start with the 5 major things it does. It provides an exception to the abortion laws when the mother has a life-threatening physical condition which could lead to death or a threat to one of her major bodily functions. It's a 2-part test which starts with the physician determining whether the life of the mom is a life-threatening physical condition. This clarification clarifies the legislative intent everyone thought we had when we passed the law several years ago. It makes clear that doctors are not required to withhold or alter life-saving treatment for cancer or other conditions if doing so will jeopardize the life or major bodily functions, including future fertility of a pregnant woman. Expressly states current law that the life-threatening condition does not have to be imminent. For example, in the case of previable premature rupture of membranes, PPROM, will result in the mom developing an infection known as sepsis. Sepsis can cause death or seriously affect the mom's bodily functions. The bill expressly states that the physician does not need to wait for the infection to develop before intervening. Provides that all parties, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, techs, and lawyers involved in making a medical determination will not be sued for aiding or abetting an abortion. Requires doctors to have continued medical education regarding abortion laws and provides continuing legal education for lawyers who advise and represent medical professionals in the area of the law. Now I want to address what is not in this bill. This bill does not address rape or incest. It does not address fatal fetal abnormalities, and this is not a choice bill. This bill addresses the life and health of the mother, period. That's it. There are two other issues I would like to further clarify during this layout, and the first one is called the 1925 law. One of four abortion laws that are amended by SB 31 is what has commonly been referred to as the 1925 law. This was the original statute banning abortions in Texas. When the Supreme Court made abortion legal under R. V. Wade, the 25 law was implied to be repealed. When R. V. Wade was overturned in Dobbs in 2022, the reason for the implied repeal went away. There is currently a federal case pending which addresses the issue of whether the 1925 statute has been revived or not. To this date, the legislature has spoken 3 times saying it believes the law is alive. Ultimately, the court will make that determination. In the meantime, the provision in SB 31 states that the bill is neutral as to whether 1925 statute has been revived or not. And by passing this bill, the bill is not taking a position on the revival of the statute one way or another. We commonly use provisions like this when there is pending litigation. The second issue is whether the bill will permit the prosecution of a pregnant woman who gets an abortion. The unequivocal answer is no. Our state has never prosecuted women who get an abortion, and nothing in SB 31 changes that. I want to thank my fellow joint authors, co-sponsors, and stakeholders for working with me on this important piece of legislation. And once again, I would like to read the people that have worked with us to put this bill together: the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, the Texas Alliance for Life, Texans for Life Committee, Texas Right to Life, the Human Coalition, Texas Medical Association, Texas Hospital Association, the Texas Civil Justice League, and the Texas Campaign for Mothers. Mr. Speaker, if anyone wants questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Schatzline, for what purpose?
would the gentleman yield for some questions?
I will.
Gentleman yields for questions.
Thank you, Representative. I just have a few clarifying questions just so I can understand it. What is the purpose of Section 170A.0021?
I'm sorry, Mr. Schatzline, which section?
170A.0021.
Do you know which page that's
It's in Section 4.
Section 4.
And page 3 of the bill.
Yes,
I believe.
I have it here. This section was moved from a previous section already in the code.
So is the section to instruct doctors to give the baby an opportunity to survive if the mother is facing a life-threatening condition? Is that the purpose of that section?
The purpose of that section, if the baby is born during the procedure or if the baby is born before the procedure can be performed, it's the doctors to use their medical judgment to help the baby survive. That is correct.
Okay, so does this section instruct doctors to try, let's say, an early induction or a C-section if possible, even if the mother is facing a life-threatening condition? Is that the idea?
It is, but it leaves it to the reasonable medical judgment of the doctor, and which is defined in code currently.
So would this section allow the doctors to perform abortions in non-life-threatening conditions?
If they are possibly life-threatening or they affect the major bodily functions, the doctor has if it's reasonable medical judgment, then they can perform an abortion.
When you say major bodily functions, could you help us identify maybe what that was? Because I think some of the concern is we want to support the bill, but some of the concern from us is, is there a major bodily function? Let me just ask it like this. If a mother has a high chance of survival, but future infertility is a risk, does this bill allow for the doctor to use their judgment to conduct an abortion?
Fertility has already by the Supreme Court has already been defined as a major bodily function. So yes, they could.
Okay. So,
Using reasonable medical judgment.
okay, that's clarifying. Does life-threatening have to be imminent?
It does not, as I said in my opening remarks.
Okay, so final question from me. What's an example of something that is life-threatening but not imminent, just so we can gain a better understanding?
Cancer treatment.
Okay.
And so a doctor will be able, and there were several examples over the last 6 or 8 months putting this bill together where doctors would not perform cancer treatment on a pregnant woman. And this will allow them to do cancer treatment if it's necessary.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Schatzline.
Ms. Harris-Davila, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields
Yes,
for
I will.
questions. He yields for questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to get some more clarification when we're talking about life-threatening and the definition in this bill. Can you walk us through? My understanding is that it's a two-part test, that you first have to prove that there is a life-threatening condition. And,
That's
and as
correct.
long as that's proven, then you go on to the rest of the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so life-threatening has to be proven first, and then if that is not proven,
Well,
nothing else in the bill comes into effect.
Life-threatening or impair the major bodily function of the mother. But that's right. That has to be done before any procedure takes place.
Right, so that's the first test, and as long as, the situation is a life-threatening situation, then the rest of the bill kicks in, but not before, right?
That is correct.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Money, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for a couple questions?
Gentleman yield for questions.
I'll be happy to.
He yields for questions.
I'm really just trying to understand this bill, and I want to support it. You got a lot of support behind it, but I just want to clarify. I think one of
Mr. Money, over the last 6 months or so, I've needed a lot of clarification myself.
well, thank you. And we've spent some time talking with some of the same stakeholders you're talking with, and I think where I'm coming from is I think that Texas's current law is clear on that the life of the mother should be protected. I think it is clear. I think the Supreme Court it has supported that. I think that the problem we're trying to solve is that there have been some malicious interpretations of the existing law, which I think is a good law, that have left some doctors in a situation that they are unclear about what they're supposed to do. And I think people that want to promote abortion have tried to make it murky what our current law is. And so my question is to you, is this law written to ensure that malicious actors won't be able to find loopholes to allow abortions that would not be allowed under our current law?
Medical malpractice is still allowed under this law, and the answer to that is yes. What we are trying to achieve here is a doctor under current law can go to jail for the rest of his life. A doctor under this current law can lose his medical license, and that's why some have been very indecisive. Lawyers that represent hospitals or any other clinic where an emergency surgery may take place are concerned and are afraid to advise a physician or a hospital that it's okay to proceed with that abortion. And this law clarifies that and gives them some clarity so they can go forward without fear of going to jail for the rest of their life.
Yes, and to be clear, I don't want anybody going to jail for doing whatever needs to be done to try to save the life of a mother who is pregnant. What I also don't want to do is shift the pendulum in the other direction so that doctors are able to concoct or find a way to perform an abortion that they wouldn't be able to under our law. And so you're saying that has been addressed and taken care of?
That has been addressed, and as I said, medical malpractice law is not being changed by this, and we are in no way promoting abortion on this. What we are trying to do is save the life or the bodily functions, major bodily functions of a mother. And I get a little emotional about this, but I've got friends who watch their wives nearly bleed out and become septic and That's the driver in this bill. In fact, a staffer, good friend of mine, that nearly happened to his wife just this past year.
Right. And we've seen those. We've seen those things in the news, and it's happened to people that we know. And I certainly want there to be clarity on being able to protect mothers who are at risk, who are. But what I don't want to say is, well, they're emotionally at risk, or they're, they could possibly, in some very remote chance, have some negative impact, so we're going to go ahead and kill a perfectly viable life.
In the bill, they have to use reasonable medical judgment, which has been defined and is supported by the board of the medical board. And so if that's happening, and a complaint can still be filed against a doctor for doing that, and but they would then have to show they use reasonable medical judgment in order to do that. And this not only protects the doctor, but it protects the nurses, the technicians, whomever is involved in the procedure. I've got a real good pro-life voting record in this house, and I want to maintain that. But I'm gonna fight to the end to make sure that we protect the doctors who are taking care of these mothers who might otherwise die.
Yes, and I want to make sure that we do exactly what you just said we would do, but that we don't leave an opening for doctors whose only goal is to try to help people have abortions. You understand that?
I do understand that, but I don't believe that this bill does that, and I don't believe that Senator Hughes would have been able to get it out of the Senate 31-0 if that were the case. I can assure you, knowing Senator Hughes for as long as I have, I promise you, they've addressed that. And
I agree with you.
And I'm not a lawyer, so.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate
Thank you for your questions.
Mr. Lowe, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes, I
Gentleman yield
will.
for questions. He yields for questions.
Sir, I have a question about reasonable medical judgment. As you know, the many doctors that worked at Planned Parenthood that killed tens of thousands, probably millions of babies, they were doctors. So can you explain to me what reasonable medical judgment is?
Reasonable medical judgment, and if you don't mind, let me flip through
Yes,
my
sir.
pages to get to that. Reasonable medical judgment has been ruled on by the Texas Supreme Court, so I'm not sure that I have the definition in here, but I think I do. I don't have that. The definition is not currently in the bill, but the Supreme Court has previously ruled on reasonable medical judgment, and I'll be happy to get that for you. I do not have it in front of me now.
Okay, there's another section of the bill that says life-threatening means capable of causing death or potentially fatal.
Or substantial impairment of the major bodily functions.
Yes, a life-threatening physical condition that is not necessarily one actively injuring the patient. So
Cancer treatment is a perfect example of that.
yes, I get that. But as you have seen, science has really advanced, and we have been able to accomplish amazing things. Babies at 26 weeks have been able to live. So do you believe that we should allow a doctor to kill a human being over cancer?
Can I go back to your first question?
Yes, sir.
Dr.
Absolutely.
Alderson. Reasonable medical judgment is what a board-certified obstetrician believes will save the life of a mother.
Okay. We also, do you know how many, if any, doctors have lost their licenses or gone to prison because they performed an abortion?
I do not, sir.
Okay.
I mean, the law was passed, it's the Heartbeat Act is not that old, and so I do not know how many have been prosecuted.
This bill creates loopholes to recharge the pro-choice industry in Texas, and I will be voting no.
Here's for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman yield for questions.
We'll go back to that in closing. Yes, I would.
Gentleman yields for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. You had mentioned a bunch of pro-life organizations that support this bill, and the Human Coalition would be one of those organizations. Are you aware that I sat on the board of Human Coalition prior to joining this
I
chamber?
was not aware of that, no ma'am.
Yes. I proudly joined that organization because they do wonderful things in the communities to serve not just saving babies, but also the women who choose to keep their children. And are you aware that during the Senate testimony that Human Coalition testified on this bill and testified that due to the Texas Supreme Court clarifications, even though they were registered for the bill, they testified that this bill was unnecessary. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that, but I know that they've signed off on this bill.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Davila, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield for questions.
Gladly.
He yields for questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back and clarify a little bit more, again, going back to the life-threatening side of this and going back to what the bill says in the section that defines life-threatening. So can you just go through, it's very specific to the pregnancy, correct?
That is correct.
And from what I'm seeing, it says a life-threatening physical condition aggravated by, caused by, or arising from a pregnancy that places a female at risk of death or poses a serious risk of substantial impairment of a major bodily function. And so again, we still have to prove that it's life-threatening, correct?
It has, yes, but it is based on the doctor's good judgment. It is not based on somebody here saying, well, she might die.
Right, and can you clarify a little bit more about the major bodily function? What kind of situations are we talking about? I know you had mentioned cancer before. What other situations will we see this?
Kidney failure, your kidney failure, liver failure, becoming septic, and which is a terrible infection. My father suffered from septic, and that's when he died. But today, the doctors have waited actually until a woman has become septic, and that can cause her kidneys to fail, it can cause her liver to fail. And so the doctor has to decide if this woman is going to die or she's not going to be able to live without being on dialysis for the rest of her life or need a transplant.
Exactly, and would you agree that sometimes there may not always be, going back to the imminent threat, you may not be bleeding out at the time, but there are indications of sepsis and other issues like that, beforehand, right? And that's
yes, that's correct.
Right, and that's why we have some of that language in the bill. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Lawson, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield
Yes,
for
I will.
questions. He yields for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. You and I worked together with our colleagues in the 87th session, did we not, to
That's correct.
protect innocent life?
When you carried the bill.
And we intended at that time to also protect mothers, didn't we?
Yes, we did. In fact, that was a major point in your opening comments, if I recall.
Yes. And your bill is designed to clarify that today, correct?
It is because of the medical board and the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court as well as the TMA asked for clarifying rules from the medical board. We didn't get them, or we got them that nobody really knew what they said. So that's why we're doing this bill, because the failure of the medical board to come up with reasonable, understandable rules. And I believe that we have that here.
I agree. I think that you do as well. I know Senator Hughes' heart for this. Having worked with him before, I appreciate you taking up that mantle in this session, and I look forward to voting for this bill with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kane, for what purpose?
Question for the author.
Gentleman yield for questions.
Yes, I will.
He yields for questions.
I'm trying to beat you up here. I've got a really important question, which is this. If this bill is enacted into law, will more or less babies be murdered by abortion?
This will not provide an excuse for an abortion. This
Will
bill
more-
will not provide an excuse for an abortion.
Yeah, but will more or less babies die? Is this going to save lives or not?
Actually, I guess that's once again up to the reasonable medical judgment of the doctor. I would say yes, probably more babies will die in an effort to save women.
More babies could die. Thanks, sir.
But I would say that I would say it's not true. I just know that we have women that are leaving the state now to get medical care that is necessary to save their life.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I move passage.
Anyone wishing to speak on, for, or against the bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Lowe in opposition.
Mr. Speaker, members, I am one of the most anti-abortion members of this body. I cannot join the Democrats or anyone else in supporting Senate Bill 31. No doctor has ever been imprisoned solely for performing an abortion to save the mother's life. The Hippocratic Oath and the courts have already provided that protection. This bill does not protect life. It weakens it. Pro-life groups may want to win to keep the fundraising flowing, but this isn't the bill. This bill loosens restrictions on the killing of unborn children. I will never support that. I vote no.
Mr. Harrison in opposition.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Texas is a pro-life state, and I think that it is and we have very strong pro-life laws on our books right now. I think that it is the height of irresponsibility to tinker with these pro-life protections that have already saved countless lives, and that we should have the full expectation will continue saving lives in the state of Texas. I respectfully disagree with the bill author, and I was very alarmed to hear him just say a few moments ago from this microphone that if this bill passes, quote, more babies will die. And I also would be remiss if I don't point out that best I can tell, every pro-abortion advocate in this chamber is supporting this bill. So if you want to continue Texas's place as a leader in the pro-life movement, please join me in voting against this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Guerin to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Before we get to the final vote, I really want to thank my joint authors. I also want to thank Lisa Kaufman and Steve and Amy Breslin for their hard work on this. And I want to thank Senator Hughes for working through this with me, and I want to thank him for being the Senate sponsor of this bill. And yes, I'll be happy to yield to Mr. Toth for a question.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Toth, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for
The
questions?
gentleman
Yes,
yield
sir.
for questions. He yields for questions.
Mr. Guerin, is there a difference between potential and imminent danger to the mother's life?
Mr. Toth, that's going to be up to the physicians that make that decision.
The answer, but it's in the legislation currently, right?
Yes, it is.
Correct. So, in the fetal pain bill that we did in 2013, how did you vote on that?
I don't remember it. I think I voted yes.
I think you did. Yes.
In fact, I know I did.
You did. I'm sorry. So, were there exceptions to the mother's life in that bill like there was in the heartbeat bill?
I assume, if I recall right, yes, there were, but there was confusion about how to interpret that. The doctors were the ones that were confused.
Were there any differences in the exception to a mother's life between fetal pain in 2013 and the heartbeat bill?
I don't recall the 2013 bill.
There were no differences. And so my question is, the courts have ruled that there only has to be a potential, correct? Not imminent, but a potential danger to the mother's life in order to stop the pregnancy.
Or bodily functions.
Correct. That's already been defined by the courts. So I'm trying to understand what your legislation does.
Well, the Supreme Court of Texas asked the medical board to come up with good rules that were understandable by the doctors, by the hospitals. The medical board didn't do that. And so it becomes a responsibility in my mind for the legislature to come up with that, and I believe that this bill does that.
Why is it that there is confusion around the heartbeat bill? Let me answer my question. I apologize. Why is it? Let me clarify my question.
Go ahead.
Please. If there is no confusion around fetal pain in 2013, why all of a sudden is there confusion around the heartbeat bill in 2025 when the exceptions are all the same, and this is an issue not of imminent. It's not about imminent death, not about imminent harm. It's about potential, which is the same as it was in 2013. Why all of a sudden is there all this confusion?
Mr. Toth, there's been confusion since that bill, and the confusion even became greater under the heartbeat bill when you put a prison sentence on a doctor for 99 years or losing his or her license. Then they were concerned that if they didn't take it to just the last minute, and, and women have died because of that.
Have any hospitals been sued as a result of it?
I'm sorry?
Have any hospitals or doctors been sued as a result of the loss of life of any women?
Not that I'm aware of, but I
Then
know
why
women.
is
But
that?
let me finish,
Why
please,
is it
Mr.
that-
Toth.
why is there not been a
Mr. Toth,
lawsuit?
will you let me finish? If you-
Members, please do not talk over each other so everybody can hear your debate.
The answer to your last question that you so rudely interrupted me on is there has been confusion. Doctors waited until the last minute to perform abortions, and women have died because of that. And that's what the confusion about. The confusion has existed since 2013. We are trying to fix that so doctors are not afraid to save a woman's life.
Can I ask a question?
You sure can.
Why have there been no lawsuits over that?
I'm not aware if there have been lawsuits or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Alverson, for what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield for questions?
Does the gentleman yield for questions? He yields for questions.
Chairman, I appreciate you bringing this bill. You probably aren't aware of this, but I get this question all the time as a physician lawmaker from doctors that I work with, and the scenarios that I hear, are truly heartbreaking scenarios, and I'm sure you've probably heard them too. Are you aware that in a lot of circumstances, a mother who is pregnant with a infant that is pre-viable, in other words, if that baby was delivered at that moment in time, 100% certainty that baby will not survive, begins to exhibit signs and symptoms of a medical condition that will be life-threatening? Have you heard these stories?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and are you aware that when somebody is in that particular circumstance, that there are doctors that know what the right thing to do is, which is to terminate the pregnancy because the pregnancy is going to end with the death of that child no matter what? The question is whether the mother survives the pregnancy. Have you heard those stories?
I have, doctor, and if the mother dies, the baby's going to die.
100% of the time, and especially in these circumstances. So the issue that I think that this bill is trying to address are these situations where a pregnancy has not yet reached the level of fetal development where the baby can exist outside of the womb, but because of complications of pregnancy, the mother is no longer able to sustain the pregnancy without losing her own life. Is that the purpose of what you're trying to do here?
That's the purpose, and Tom, honestly, some of the stories I've heard over the last 6 to 8 months have been heart-wrenching, and if it affected me, think how it affected the mother and the family. These women are not going there to get rid of a baby. They're going there to save their lives, and the doctors are performing the abortion in order to save the woman's life. And once again, if the mother dies, the baby's going to die.
And are you aware that a lot of these medical conditions like hemorrhage, infection, are things where physicians are looking at the law as written, and the issue boils down to the fact that in their medical judgment there is 100% likelihood that ultimately that woman is going to die from the signs and symptoms and the diagnosis of whatever condition is beginning to manifest, but they're not dying yet.
I would agree with that.
And so what you're trying to allow for is in those circumstances for a physician to exercise medical judgment to save the woman's life before she's about to die.
Yes, sir, and you've taken the Hippocratic Oath,
Yes, sir.
but a doctor has taken that and is looking there and saying, I don't know what to do. I may go to jail for the rest of my life if I perform this, but if I wait a little bit longer, then maybe I can do that. Well, the mother might die
And
in
Chairman,
that, in that short period of time.
I can't tell you how many times I've had that exact conversation with my colleagues, and I get really sick and tired of having to respond by saying, I don't know. And so I thank you for
and I
this
don't
bill.
know is not a good answer now, and we're trying to fix I don't know. We're trying to make it a clear decision for the doctor to make, not for me to make, not for Mr. Lozano to make, for the doctor to make.
And Chairman, last sort of question is, so again, we are not talking about circumstances where the baby could be delivered and could survive, even in an ICU on life support, but in any circumstance. If it were the case that the doctor could deliver the child and the child could survive, do you believe that's the direction that they would go?
I do believe that, yes.
So the only circumstances that we're talking about are circumstances where the pregnancy has not yet reached any known level of viability. In other words, in order for that child not to die, that mother has to remain pregnant beyond the time in which she has left before she will die.
That's right, sir.
And so these are the heartbreaking circumstances that you're trying to address so that doctors feel like they can actually use their judgment in these heartbreaking scenarios without having to lose two patients.
Tom, thank you very much because you explained it much better than I did. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to work with you as always, my friend. Thank you for your bill.
Thank you.
Tender for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield for questions.
I will.
He yields for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that you've been working closely with the pro-life organizations, and I think there might be some confusion, even with me. I want to understand. Every medical emergency has to be life-threatening according to Section 170A.002. You and I both know that every medical emergency has to be life-threatening. That's correct.
Life-threatening or affect the function of a major bodily organ.
The filed version of the bill on the floor had struck that, but the new version, the committee sub, includes it. My understanding when I read the bill. So
that is correct.
So every emergency must be life-threatening in this version of the bill.
That is correct.
So I just want to clear something up. Earlier, someone had asked a question and said, is life-threatening and is a medical emergency considered fertility? I think the answer is no. I want to make sure that there was no...
Fertility is a major bodily function, as the Supreme Court has ruled that fertility is a major bodily function.
But would it meet the standard of being a medical emergency that is life-threatening? And if you don't know, we can find out, or do you...
Well, and life-threatening, the doctors and the hospitals agree that keeping the life-threatening law and conforming, it makes it conforming to other statutes, current statutes that are on the books today.
What I'm trying to do here with this question is I want the body to know we want to get to a yes on this bill because I don't think there's one person on the floor today that wants any woman to ever die during the course of being pregnant or during the course of childbirth.
I sure hope you're right about that.
I think so, and I think there are a lot of people concerned that this could potentially lead to additional abortions that some of us would say are unnecessary and others would say that they're acceptable. I'm just trying to hash out before we push the button and vote, will this potentially create more abortions or will it protect women from dying during life-threatening medical emergencies and defining that? Because I think if we can get to the right spot where everyone understands what we're talking about and we're talking on the same sheet of music, I think we can get a lot more people to vote yes on it. And that's my concern right now because there's the filed version and I hear a lot of people talking about that version. But there is, sir, is there not a committee sub that was submitted that does have those changes made to it that was worked through pro-life.
Life-threatening was put back into the bill.
And that was worked through organizations, pro-life organizations.
Every
that you and I
one
work
of them, and extensively worked, because there were changes made in the bill over the last few months by the governor's office, the speaker's office, the lieutenant governor's office, when they have been in consulting with all of these pro-life organizations, every one of them, as well as the doctors and the hospitals, because the doctors and the hospitals had to be consulted in this so we could get this right, and we wouldn't be opening up abortion clinics. We would be performing necessary abortions to save the life of the mother.
My pledge to you when I get off the mic, I'm going to call the pro-life organizations while other questions are being asked, and I want to ask
some of them are out back.
I want
you
to
won't
talk
have to
to
call them. You just walk out
I
there.
want to walk out and talk to them about the the fertility piece, because I think that could be an issue with some people voting. But I think the goal is to protect women today, and I agree. I think that's your goal. But I think we want to get the right answer. So I'm going to go step outside real quick and let some other folks answer. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Little, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, is the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield for questions.
Gladly.
He yields for questions.
Chairman Guerin, I apologize that I wasn't in the Senate when this passed 31-0, and I wasn't on the committee that considered this bill. I can see that a tension has developed in the room, and I want to give you an opportunity to resolve it for us if you can. The tension is we have a very laudable goal and an important thing to do in protecting women who are pregnant, right?
Yes, sir.
And on the other end, we have a concern among our conservatives in the room that this bill will be used as a pretext for elective abortions. And if I can just pose to you the situation, there's language in the bill, and I think this distills right to the heart of the issue. I hope it does anyway, and maybe other people in the room are trying to resolve this tension as well. There's language in the bill that addresses substantial impairment of a major bodily function. And I think the fear is, the collective fear, that a doctor is going to say, well, my patient came in and said she's worried about being able to have her next baby, so rubber stamp, POW, abortion granted. Is that what's going to happen under this bill?
I don't believe that it is, Mr. Little. As I said earlier, the malpractice doctors that can be charged with malpractice still under the bill. We're not changing that. We're obviously going to have to use the best medical judgment of the doctors, which I'm not. But we have to leave it up to those people to make that final decision, and that's what this bill does. And I don't believe that we would have the support of the groups that we do if they thought that this was going to cause a bunch of abortion clinics to open up.
Do you see and understand the concern that people have over that?
I do, and I shared that concern. I had that concern. I no longer have it in the groups and the doctors that I've talked to.
And Chairman Guerin, if some physicians turn out to perceive this as a license to do exactly that, to use this as a pretext for granting elective abortions, you'll stand up here with me and the other conservatives in this room and prevent that, correct?
Absolutely, and if they get the 99 years in jail for it, they deserve it.
Thank you, Chairman Guerin.
Mr. Speaker.
Tenderholt, for what purpose?
Gentleman yield for questions.
Gentleman yield for questions.
I will, Mr. Tenderholt.
Gentleman yields for questions.
Does the new version we got from the Senate require that all medical emergencies are life-threatening, including impairment of major bodily function?
Yes.
That does not include, I just talked with the pro-life organizations, that does not include fertility.
Fertility has been ruled a major bodily function by the Texas Supreme Court, Mr. Tenderholt.
Impairments of a major function have to be life-threatening, and I'm being told that the fertility is not. They're telling me that that's absolutely not true. Is that
fertility is a major bodily function, but it has to be under this bill, it has to be life-threatening. Let me finish. In the opinion of the doctor that's performing the procedure.
So let's go down that road for a minute because I want to understand it. So if there's a fertility issue, and I'm not a medical professional, I'm hoping that a medical professional can clear this up for us. If there is a fertility issue that's life-threatening, it means that it's a medical emergency. That would be the only instance. It wouldn't just be that, hey, if you have this child, you could not be fertile ever again in your life.
Right. Let me read, can I read
Yes, sir.
this to you? Notwithstanding any other law, a physician who treats a condition described in subsection 170A002B2 shall do so in a manner that, in the exercise of reasonable medical judgment, provides the best opportunity for survival of the unborn child.
Okay.
So if the doctor can save the child, the doctor's got to save the child. If a doctor cannot save the child in order to save the life of the mother, then the child will not survive.
And I think the goal here is exactly what we talked about. I think everyone in the room wants to protect women, but we also want to protect unborn children. And I'm being told that the fertility, I want to be clear to all the members that have questions, that fertility issues that are not life-threatening, that are not going to be a medical emergency, are not reasons for an abortion unless it's going to be life-threatening to the mother or the child at that time.
That's correct, Mr. Tenderholt. But for the fertility systems are not just about having babies. It affects your other organs and hormone systems. For cancer, autoimmune system, pituitary glands, and hormones, and it's a long list. And so once again, it's going to be up to the best reasonable medical judgment of the doctor.
Okay, thank you.
In a life-threatening situation, the doctor is going to have to make that decision, not us.
Thank you for answering my questions and working with the pro-life groups. I think this is going to be an interesting vote, so thank you.
Look, we've worked with pro-life groups that have done their best to get me defeated in an election, and I've been happy to do it. And so I move passage, and once again, I thank all of you members for taking the time to listen to me today. You know I'm not normally on the mic this long.
Question occurs on passage third reading. Record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Show Mr. Guerin voting aye, Ms. Hull voting aye, Mr. Leach voting aye. Mr. King voting aye. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? 129 ayes and 6 nays. Senate Bill 31 passes to third reading.